So we'll talk about place value in decimals. And remember at the beginning of chapter 1, we talked about the place value to the right. We said this was ones. I had trouble writing it then as well. Let me try again. There we go. And then tens, and then hundreds, and then thousands, and then 10,000s, and then 100,000s, millions. So I repeat that because the numbers, the place values to the right of the decimal are the same as the place values to the left. There's two differences. One is that they end in THS, and I'll show you that in a second. The other is that there is no repeat of the ones spot. There's only one ones spot. So the first place value to the right of the decimal is like the tens. We just call it the tenths, THS, because it's after the decimal. The next place value is like the hundreds. We write the hundred first, and then we write THS on the end, and it's hundredths. The next place value is like the thousands. We write it over here. We write thousand, but then we write THS on the end, thousandths. The next one is like the 10,000s. We write 10 thousandths. And then the last spot I have here would be like the next spot over here. That would be 100,000s. So we would write 100 thousandths. And it keeps going just like it does to the left. The next spot would be millionths, 10 millionths, 100 millionths, and so on. So let's look at this. The place value of the 1, you can look at the top of your page, is right after the decimal. That's called the tenths. So that'd be 1/10. And we write that as a fraction. We would write 1 over 10 because it's in the tenths spot, and the number itself is a 1/10. The place value of the 9 is 3 spots after, so it goes tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So we'd say it's 9 thousandths. We would write that as 9 over 1,000, 9 thousandths. The 3 is to the left of the decimal, and it goes ones and then tens. So it says 3 tens. And the fractional value is really 3 times 10. It's really just 30 because it's to the right of the decimal. It's not part of a number. It's a number itself. So the 7 is 2 numbers after, so that's tenths and then hundredths. So we would say 7 hundredths. We'd write that 7 over 100. The 8 is in the 4th spot, so that's 1 tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So we had 8 10,000ths. And we'd write that as 8 over 10,000. And the 4 goes ones, tens, hundreds. It'd be 4 hundredths. And we would write that as 400. When we read a decimal, we read the decimal point as the word and. In chapter 1, I told you we don't say the word and that's because the and is reserved for when we see a decimal. So we read the number after the decimal the same way you would read a number before the decimal, but we say the place value at the very end. So let's look at an example. So if this number was just this, no decimal point, we would read it as 53. So that's how we start, by reading this number as well. We just read 53. Then we look at the place value. The place value of the 3 is in the hundredths. So we say that place value at the end, and we would read this as 53 hundredths. So when we write a check, this has to write it as if you're writing a check. You write the number before the decimal in words. 72. And all two-digit numbers after you get to 20 are hyphenated. Well, like, not 20, 30, 40, not those numbers, but anything that it's like 22, 24, 72. You write the 70 and the 2, and then you put a dash between them. And then in a check, we write the decimal point, we write the word and. Just as if you were reading it, this would be read 72 and. If you're reading this officially without the dollar sign, we'd be say 72 and 94 hundredths, because the last number is in the hundredth spot. So that's how we finish writing the check. We finish writing the check with the cents over 100, 94 hundredths. And then we usually draw a line at the end so that nobody can change those numbers. Okay, so this problem wants us to write this as a fraction or a mixed number. So we look at that, we would read that as 32 hundredths. The 2 is in the hundredths spot. So that's how we would write it as a fraction, 32 over 100. And then we need to reduce it. So we can divide both the top and the bottom by 2, and we get 16 over 50. We can do that again. We can divide it by 2, and we get 4 over 25. Nothing else goes into that, so it's finished. Now again, you can use your fraction button. Once it's in fraction form, you could type in 32 fraction button, and then the 100, and hit enter, and it will give you the reduced fraction. This problem is a lot the same. There's a number in front, and so that's how we get the mixed number. The number in front of the decimal to the left of the decimal is our big number for our mixed number. And then we write the 125, the number after the decimal, on top. And then we look at the place value of the last number. That place value is in the thousandths spot, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So we would write this over 1,000. And then we need to reduce it. So I would start by dividing by 25, and that would give me negative 15. And 125 divided by 25 is 5, just like money. Think $1.25, how many quarters in $1.25? And the bottom would be like how many quarters in $10? And that would be 40. Now I'm not done. I can still divide these by 5. Notice the 15 in front, negative 15 in front, doesn't change. It's just the fraction that we reduce. And this is our final answer. Rounding decimals works the same way as we did in Module 1. You can look back at page 4. Except the numbers after the decimal do not become 0 automatically. The last number we write down is the number that's in the given place value. So if it says round to the nearest tenths, you want your last number to be in the tenths spot. If it says round to the nearest thousandths, you want your last number to be in the thousandth spot. So this problem says round to the nearest tenth. So if you remember, we underlined that spot, the nearest tenth, so the 2 is in the tenth spot, and we look at the number after it. The number after it is 4 or lower, which tells us to keep this 2 the same. So we would write 0.2. Now, because it says the nearest tenth spot, we want our last number to be in the tenth spot. We don't want any numbers after it. So we don't write that 3, and we don't write a 0. We just don't write anything after the 2. That's our answer, 2 tenths. So this problem wants us to round to the nearest cent. Cent is two numbers after. Cent stands for 100, really, so this is talking about the 100th spot. Like a century is 100 years, a centipede has 100 legs, and cents, there's 100 cents in a dollar. So if we look at this, we're looking at this as our underlying number. The number after it tells us to leave this number the same. And then that's the last number we want to write down. So we don't write the rest of that. We would just write $5.92. In this example, we're trying to compare. I think it's easier if we write the numbers above each other, up and down. And when we do that, we really want to line up the decimal. So the decimal for the second number, I want to put directly below the number for the first decimal. So and then each of the numbers, other numbers, directly in a straight line. So this would still be 147, and then after it is 0451. And then this allows us just to compare numbers to numbers. We start at the right-hand side, or left-hand side. These are the same, these are the same, these are the same, these are the same, but these are not. And the 5 is bigger than the 4, which means the first number is bigger than the second number. So again, remember our sign opens to the bigger number. And that should help you do this homework.